Hey everybody, welcome to the Book Leads Impactful Books for Life and Leadership. I'm your series host and leadership performance coach, John Jaramillo. In this podcast series, I get to the books that have impacted the people in my network, colleagues, old friends, new friends. I want to interview these great leads about the books that have impacted their life, their work, their leadership. So I want to know what has contributed the most to the value that they carry, the ones that stand out. And in the series, I tend to cover three categories of conversations. The first is a book that they're sharing with me that I haven't read. The second is a book that we've both read, whether specifically for the episode or we've read in our past lives before the series. The third is when I'm lucky enough to have authors and or publishers on to talk about the books that they're getting out there that they want to share with, as many people as possible to get that value out there of the message. Today, I have two authors, co-authors, and my guests today are Alyssa Berthiaume and Bridgett McGowen Hawkins. And Ally is an award-winning author, international book coach, developmental editor, and ghostwriter, and the founder and CEO of The Right Place, Right Time. Bridgett is an award-winning international professional speaker, an award-winning author, and an award-winning publisher, and the owner of the hybrid publishing company, Press 49. And I was introduced to Ally by Edie Clark, a video producer and YouTube strategist with whom I had a conversation in episode 48, where we covered two books, Hello Fears, Crush Your Comfort Zone, and Become Who You're Meant to Be by Michelle Poler, and Practical Law of Attraction, Align Yourself with the Manifesting Conditions and Successfully Attract Your Desires by Victoria Gallagher. Every time I interview somebody, have a conversation with them, and they were introduced to me by someone else, and if I had an episode, I always want to share what that back catalog of knowledge is. So after we were introduced by Edie, I had Ally on and we recorded episode 46 of the Book Leads, in which we covered her book, Dear Universe, I Get It Now, Letters on the Art and Journey of Being Brave and Being Me. And now, leading up to this episode, Ally introduced me to Bridgett. So here we are. They have a book coming out, or it has come out. So thank you, Ally and Bridgett, for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, John.
Now, typically, anybody that listens to the series know that I do a deep dive with the guests to get to the story of who they are, how they started, the path to get to where they are now. Since we have two guests now, we're kind of limited on that. Ally, we know about you from episode 46. We're still going to get to know you here, but we're not going to go as deep. Bridgett, I'm going to invite for an episode back to dive in deeper into her past and who she is. But in the meantime, for this episode, I do want to ask each of you who you are today, what you're up to today, and then we can get into the book. And Bridgett, since you are the new kid on the block, if you'd love to start, that'd be great.
Right. Awesome. Thanks again, John, for having us and for highlighting the book. Ally and I met because of my work as a publisher, but that wasn't my first passion. I started off as a professional speaker in 2001. And it was being a speaker at a conference where they were like, hey, do you have a book to sell in our bookstore?
Mm-hmm.
And I had been speaking for many years at that point. It was the year 2019, John. And I don't know what slapped me upside the head, but I said, yeah, I've got a book, although I didn't. And it'll be ready in time for the conference, which I don't know what I was thinking. And it was the creation of that book back in 2019 that led me to establish Press 49 later that year. And I'm a hybrid publisher. We're publishing nonfiction works, memoirs, business books, personal and professional development books. But yeah, that's me, publisher, speaker, and author, mom, wife, all around rock star. No, I'm kidding. Yeah.
No, absolutely. First of all, since the speaking came before the book, what was your speaking? What were your speaking engagements about? What was the topic?
Right. Pretty dull. Presentation skills.
Okay. Figures, right. And then what was the book that you put out when somebody said you needed a book? What was the title of the book?
Real Talk. What other experts won't tell you about how to make presentations that sizzle. It's in its second edition, won a couple of awards too. Pretty proud of it.
Awesome. I love how, you have that history of telling the reader, like, I have the information you need. And then this book right now, the one that you're putting out now with Ally, do not write a book without, right? Ally, why don't you share a little bit about your background today, what you're up to, who your clients are, and so forth?
Sure. So the Cliff Notes version is I am a book coach and ghostwriter. for others in addition to being an author for myself. And I really work with entrepreneurs, leaders, visionaries across North America and Europe predominantly in writing really impactful books that light up their worlds and others. My favorite genre to play in is memoir, but coming up second runner are your personal professional development books in the nonfiction space. You know, the coaches, the consultants, the speakers who want to write books to share their methodology, their framework, their expertise. So nonfiction is completely my jam. And I'm really this year in a season where I want to call forward more people who feel like they've been pushed to the sidelines, whether because of a particular category or identification that they align with and we're not hearing from them enough, or they feel marginalized by an experience they've been through that we're not talking about enough in literature. So that's who I'm really wanting to serve currently.
Ally, obviously, since I'm a leadership coach, I have to ask, what does leadership mean to you? And then I'll ask Bridgett the same question.
Oh my gosh, leadership. Well, I think leadership is starting with yourself and then rippling it out to others. And it's a matter of values, alignment, integrity in doing what you say, and standing up for what you believe in and role modeling for the people who are coming up behind you.
Bridgett?
Not feeling like you're too big to do all the things you want those you're leading to do.
Where does that stand out? Like, you don't have to name names, but can you give some example or an example in the past of something that might have stood out that looked like that?
Well, I will say when I was in corporate America, I worked for an ed tech company and I had a couple of managers on my team, and they had no problem with doing anything they would ask us to do. As leaders, oftentimes people will kind of give assignments, give tasks, give work to people that they're leading, feeling like they're too big, they're too important to do it. But those two managers, I remember particularly, had no issue with asking us to do anything. And if we couldn't do it, they had no problem jumping in, doing it themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. It's avoiding the whole do as I say attitude.
Yes.
Thank you for those examples. So now I'm curious, what brought these two forces on my screen? What brought you together? How did you meet? What's the story behind that relationship?
Ally, we really need to button up this story because we know this question is going to get asked, John, every time. And it ends up being just, well, you know, one summer and was it a podcast? And was it so Ally, I'm going to let you take it because as you can see, I have not come up with a buttoned up version.
I got this, Bridgett. So Bridgett and I originally met actually just through LinkedIn. I think we had some mutual connections. She reached out. She sent me a DM. She said, hey, let's get to know each other. We jumped on an initial call. That led to her coming on to my monthly live series, Open Book Broadcast, which I stream across a few channels. And it was actually after we stopped recording. We were no longer live. We were sitting in the back of the StreamYard studio debriefing on our conversation. And that's when we got on a roll, talking about the three main things that we wished clients who came to us knew before they started writing a book. We called it the Trifecta. And we can talk about the Trifecta in a second, but essentially one of us, this is where we're really not sure. One of us said to the other, hey, this would actually make a really great book. And that's just natural, right? She's in publishing. I do the book writing thing, right? Of course, we were going to leave that conversation saying, oh, this could be a book. And without knowing each other very well and without having a real, plan in mind, we said, yeah, let's do that. And we set up a meeting the following month and we jumped into it and bada bing, bada boom, March 2024, and the books come out.
When was that event where you had that debriefing at the end of the StreamYard? How long ago was that?
I know.
That you know. Okay, perfect.
Well, this is no. I have this really strange thing with dates, Ally. It's like that Mary Lou Henner thing almost. It was late July. It was late July when we had that podcast conversation. And then it was about a week or so later in August when we had our initial conversation to lay out this plan for the book. And that was in 2022, to be exact. We said we were going to publish August 8th of 2023. That didn't happen. And here we are in the first part of 2024.
So can you give us an overview of the book? Just what kind of path you lead the reader on? How is it you want to break it down? Obviously, there are a lot of books in this space. And I've seen Ally's work, and Bridgett, since we connected on LinkedIn, I've seen your work, what you share, what you put out there. Every book that comes out is going to have its own, aside from what's in the book, its own energy. So how did you want to shape this? How did you want to craft this book to really have it stick? I mean, for me, the title sticks first and foremost. And then from what I know of your separate works, but how did you want to craft this to stand out from other books that may have similar messages?
I've got two things that come to mind, and Bridgett, you can piggyback. So number one was we were really wanting to achieve a one-stop shop kind of book. We wanted people to not have to go down the Google rabbit hole of like learning about publishing, learning about marketing, learning about writing a book, and trying to piece this whole thing together by this article over there and a blog post over here. We wanted them to basically have a, by their side desk reference that they could refer to from the very beginning of their writing journey through to the other side of the writing journey. So publication and promotion. Of course, recognizing that even at the size that this book has landed on at 402 pages, there are still things that we could have said and we could have wrote about, but we wanted to give them the one-stop shop and all of the basics in one place. The second thing, in terms of the energy of the book, we wanted to have fun. We wanted people to have fun reading it. We wanted people to get the real talk. We wanted it to be honest and upfront, and as well as applicable, like not just jargon and industry speak. No, we wanted to talk to real people, put it in layman's terms, make it digestible, and then give them some really specific things that they could do to actually reach success on the other side.
And I would add, we wanted to make sure it was zero fluff. Initially, we were going to write it so it was, I don't want to say pocket size, but we were talking about 25,000 words. And we laid out the chapters. Actually, Ally laid them out, being the ghostwriter that she is and the writing coach that she is. She laid out, hey, these are the parts, this is what needs to be in it, and let's just write. She had her two parts, I had my two parts. And then we got to a first draft, John, and we said, well, I said, hey, Ally, we're past the 25,000 word mark. It was like maybe 32,000 words. How are we feeling? Because we also had a budget. And we had planned out how much we were going to spend on typesetting, cover design, and editing, and all of that. And the editing and the typesetting, those costs go up the more words you have. So I said, Ally, I just want to bring to your attention, we're beyond this 25,000 word threshold. And we said, you know what? As long as there's no fluff, let's keep writing. So that's what I would add to it, is we would come up with something. Oh my goodness, Ally, I read this. Oh my goodness, Bridgett, I just had a conversation with so-and-so about X, or I listened to this podcast. We've got to add it to the book. We need to bring this up. We need to make our reader aware of this. And so it's, nearly 100,000 words of no fluff.
Ally, you had said you'd come up with like the outline of the chapters that you thought should be in there. And then Bridgett, you had spoken that how you broke it into her two parts, your two parts. Ally, first for you, how did you come up with those chapters? Like, if you could, just a brief walkthrough of what the chapters are, and maybe some thoughts on a couple of them, not every single one, but maybe the ones that stand out to you, why those needed to be included in there.
Yeah. So first and foremost, that behind the scenes kind of studio conversation that Bridgett and I had kind of outlined who are we trying to reach and what exactly we wanted to say. And this is something we talk about in the book, but understanding your who and your what, as well as your why, are like three of the most basic things that writers should really have an understanding of before they're putting pen to paper. So with that in mind, with who we wanted to reach, what we wanted to say to them, and then why we wanted to do this, that was really the filter for which I came up with the outline for the book. And so I mentioned the trifecta, right? We had these 3 areas that we wanted to make sure that authors knew before they got going. One had to do with business mindset, like treating their book like a business. And this whole kind of mindset perspective strategy around that was really important and crucial. 2 was the truth around ROI, how to make your money back off of your book and what the return on investment actually looks like and how it actually works. And then 3, the actual makings of a great book. Like, that it's not just writing. There's so many more things that you have to consider. And so very naturally, the trifecta basically turned into the individual parts of the book. And that's where we began. We started with what we knew, and then we filled in the gaps by working backwards. So each of those parts has multiple chapters broken down into more individual bite-sized chunks that reflect back to the bigger, broader concept. So for me, in part 1, it's really about your book as your business. And we cover the CEO mindset, that you are not just the author, you're the CEO of your book, and your book is a business. And to me, that is front and center. It's exactly what everybody needs to know before they get going, and is probably one of the things that I think makes our book stand out against other books that are similar, because we talk about a mindset and a perspective that many people don't cover.
Okay.
And then with part 3, it was focused on publishing, marketing, and making money from your book. And that's where I spent most of my energy talking about the different publishing avenues that are available to you, and the pros and cons, or the benefits versus not quite benefits of each of those avenues. And then really spending time on talking about marketing starts before the book is even published. And that if you want people to continue buying your book after it's published, that you need to still talk about it. You can't talk about it on the day that it comes out and then nobody hears anything else about it. And then finally, I delve into how do you make money off of your book without even selling a copy of it. The book is just a gateway to other opportunities. Now, there are some authors, John, where they're making a fabulous living off of just book sales. But for the average author, that doesn't necessarily happen. So we spend time talking about several avenues, active and inactive, if you will, of how you can make money from being a published author.
Ally, can you go through some of the, you gave the parts, an overview of the parts, the components. Can you go through some of the chapter names just to get a little more specific as to what that path looks like?
Yeah. In fact, I will just refer directly to the book itself that is sitting right next to me. And, we pride ourselves on some of these being kind of catchy. So part 1, your book is your business. And within here, we've got you're the CEO and your book is your business, which obviously fits really nicely with part 1. Chapter 3 is setting up your book and book business for success. So that's like the nitty gritty, like talking about bank accounts, EIN numbers. I mean, we're really giving people like depth here on how to do this the right way and in a legitimate kind of way, in terms of thinking about taxes, thinking about the IRS, those types of things. Part 2, the makings of a good book. Things in here include understanding the book life cycle. Chapter 6, I love this one. We do judge a book by its cover, which has great material in it about all of the cover components, not just the image on the front, and why you need to be paying attention to what's going on with your design. Part 3, publishing, marketing, and making money from your book, which Bridgett was just talking about. And in here we have chapter 10, the truth about your spend, your ROI, and your royalties. Chapter 11, know how to make money from your book. Both of these chapters are extremely rich with information, because it's really truly getting into the details of what exactly are you making off of a book sale, so that people can truly understand that book sales is not where it's at when you're really wanting to get the return on your investment. And part 4 is calling in the pros. This is basically taking everything from the first 3 parts and then saying, hey, you can't do this on your own. You're going to need some help. This is who you should work with, and this is why. So we've got chapter 13, finding the support you need exactly when you need it, and chapter 14, when it's time to call on the pros. So really understanding who are the people in the space, and then when are you going to need them. And one of the things that people don't realize, so I'm just going to call it out, is that while a good majority of this book are those 4 meaty parts, we have almost an entire alphabet of appendices in the back of this, filled with to-do lists, templates, checklists, budgets, lists of resources. Literally, it goes Appendix A to Appendix R.
Wow.
So we have put like our best and brightest of information and ideas into this book for folks to truly write and publish a book the right way.
And I know you didn't ask for it, John, but I'm going to share some of the titles from the appendix. It's just that hot.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Go for it. Go for it.
These are some of my favorites. 10 questions to ask yourself before you start your book. You know, the appendix is almost like a chapter in itself. Some people may want to go directly to it. How to determine if a publishing company is reputable. The people on the publishing path. Let me think. What's another one that I absolutely love? The self-editing checklist. What you need on your book's website or web page. How to get testimonials and advance praise. Podcast guest best practices. Folks, before they come on your show, they might want to buy the book just to get that appendices.
That's amazing, just because I enjoy writing. I've toyed with it. And then, yeah, there's just so many resources out there. So I like that you started with that idea of having that pocket, that pocket book that has all that information in there. Obviously, with your knowledge, as you're writing, things are going to come to you. So it went beyond those initial 25,000 words. But I like the fact that it's one stop, that, as Ally had mentioned, and she kind of painted that visual, you don't have to go to this blog post to find this, and maybe this book references that. And it's intimidating because you see people in your network, I mean, this is my experience, putting out books, and some relatively quickly because they've been doing it, a while. So they've gone through that first iteration, that first path to the first one. I feel like it's going to be like most things where it won't be easy. It won't be perfect after the first time, but that after you go through it that first time, you've learned best practices. There have been growing pains, so you feel more comfortable the second time. All of that is just to say, I love the fact that just from you, Ally, breaking down the chapters, and Bridgett, obviously the appendices and all that, it just seems like it's got the answer for most of the questions that you would have. And based on your experiences, your separate careers, you've seen most of those issues that people come up against. So I love that it's just like one stop. The questions that you want answers to, everything is lined up here. And you yourselves have probably gone through those pains of those first books that you've put out. So I love that it's best practices.
I think we even mentioned that, Ally. I think we even mentioned that in the book very briefly, that if we had it to do over again, based on what we know now, there are so many things we would do differently with our first books. I know without a doubt.
Can you give some examples, Bridgett?
For one, with my first book, Real Talk, I had this big picture of myself on the cover. That is a no, unless you are a recognizable figure, a celebrity, a big name, a politician. But the average person shouldn't necessarily put their picture on the cover of their book. A nice little small one on the back, I can't think of the word I'm looking for. That works fine on the back, a small one of you, or inside, but not on the cover, because someone's passing your book on a shelf. It's not going to grab their attention versus passing Viola Davis's face on the cover of a book. So that's definitely one that one misstep, I guess I should say, that I would totally correct. And I did in the second edition of Real Talk. You don't see my picture on the front of the cover.
What about you, Ally?
Well, I did the same thing. I put my picture on the front cover. Now, that said, while it is a no-no, my whole book was about being brave and being myself. So in some ways, I think I can get away with it from a like messaging and branding standpoint, but truly from a memoir perspective, especially, it's a no-no because I'm not anybody in comparison to, people who are recognizable off of the street. Apart from that though, I went in without a budget, without any idea how much I was going to spend in the long run. So I was just paying for things a little bit at a time until all of a sudden it was like time for editing. Woo, a couple $1,000s. It's time for typesetting, another couple $1,000s. And I don't have any regrets. That book needed to come out regardless. But, it would have probably been nice to have been setting aside some money ahead of time. And not getting walloped with certain bills along the journey that I wasn't prepared for because I hadn't sat down and actually figured out what this whole cost was going to look like. And then to have a much more strategic plan on how I was going to make that cost back. And so a lot of these personal life lessons and experiences definitely, shaped and informed what we share in the book, but so have the stories and the things that we've heard from clients along the way, the common questions that we get asked when we're on conversations with possible new clients, or we're networking, or at other speaking gigs. And there's even people like in the last 6 or 7 months that I know that have published, and they said, "Oh my gosh, I wish I had this book a year ago," because they felt their own pain in making some of these common errors and mistakes. And now they're getting the book because they don't want to make the same mistakes the next time.
Even though this is your industry, this is your work, this is what you've been doing, in your writing of the book, is there anything that changed in your mind, or a lens shift based on the topic, based on writing, based on publishing, even maybe an aha moment? Is there anything that you did in the book or in the process of putting out the book that something shifted in your thinking on the industry because of your experience writing the book? When you're putting things to paper or computer, whatever it may be, you tend to kind of view it in a different way when it's on the screen or whatever. Is there anything that changed in you because this book came out, the way that you may view things differently? To either of you, the question.
Well, one of the things that comes to mind is co-authoring. I mean, I was a kid, I think Bridgett can agree, because we've had a conversation about this. I was a kid who hated group projects. I did not want to be a part of group projects because
Same.
I inevitably was the person who was doing the work while everybody else was getting part of the credit. And Bridgett and I think this speaks to both who we are as well as having found a really aligned partner in this. But, we jumped in without knowing each other very well. It could have been a real cluster from start to finish. Like just, and yet we found ourselves just completely in step the entire time.
Yeah, that's rare.
We're in step in terms of how we see the industry, how we see the process, the values that we hold in terms of the work that we do, the way that we want to treat clients. But also we're accountable for our own deadlines. We are accountable for communication and transparency when we weren't going to meet those deadlines. We were forthcoming when we thought we got to add this or we got to take away that. I think the thing that we didn't agree on the most was the special feature designs. There were lots of different designs for like calling out, definitions or adding a chart. And like, we didn't seem to line up on those, but every other thing we found ourselves like, oh yeah, nodding and in agreement. And so it's been this beautiful partnership. And I feel like it's rare, but I also would have never considered it before. And now I'm like, oh, this was really great. Like, this is not an impossible thing. And so I guess where I'm going with this is if you're a person who has a really strong power partner, you're working adjacent in the same space, right? I'm bringing book coaching, ghostwriting, editing. Bridget's bringing publishing, marketing, promoting. We are a powerhouse of knowledge. It's a perfect collaboration of information to have a co-authored book. So other people who are like, I don't want to bite off a book on my own. I don't have the time to devote to an entire book, but I want a book. I'm not really a big fan of multi-author volumes, but I would promote a co-authored book if they found the right person to work with.
I second everything Ally said. I agree wholeheartedly. Again, I wasn't a fan of the group work in school or at any point. And it was amazing, John, how everything just clicked. I mean, the work ethic, the communication, it was just so smooth. It was like co-authoring a book with myself, with a twin. I mean, everything just went so smoothly. It was insane, really.
Write it down, John. This is how insane it was. Around the holidays, Bridget and I each separately had the idea to send each other a Christmas gift. Okay. Bridget sent me a sweater, like a hoodie, that said bruh, formerly known as mom. Okay.
Formerly known as what?
Mom, formerly known as mom. We both have boys. And every now and then, instead of mom or mother or ma or mama, we're bruh. And we had bonded over this, in the earlier phases of our work together, because we were really getting to know each other as we were working on the book. So here it is, it's a year in or whatever, Christmas time. And I open this up and I cannot stop laughing. What I know is that on the way to Bridget's house is a sweatshirt in black instead of gray that says the exact same thing.
Wow.
And I just waited. I didn't say anything. I just waited for her to get that package in the mail and open it up and realize the mind meld that has been happening between us, over the last 18 months.
You have become one.
So, there is something to say for when it's right, it's right, when you find the right person in anything. And, this is something too that we actually speak to in the book, loosely in Calling in the Pros, which is that anytime you're working with anybody on your book, even if you're not co-authoring, you're going to get to a point where you're going to need the editor, you're going to need the cover designer, you're going to need the publisher. Any of those people who are touching your darling that you've just worked so hard at, you need to have alignment with them. They need to care as much about your book as you do, because they're helping you cross the finish line. And I think, for Bridget and I, this has been truly a manifestation of what alignment and intentionality, look like in this space.
That's incredible, because you may have had the experiences before, maybe not looking for a co-author, but seeing people in your circles on LinkedIn that are really pumped on it or putting out great information, and they say they want to do something, and then after the fact, it kind of just fizzles. So it's incredible that you had this energy after this conversation, that live event that you had, Ally, and then it saw itself to fruition. It's incredible when two people can really follow through to that point. I found it myself in some of my partnerships. I've heard of horror stories from other people, from clients. So it's like lightning struck for the two of you, and that's amazing.
It really restored my faith in collaborating with others, because like you said, we've all had those instances where you have a connection, you have a conversation to see if any synergy exists, you come up with an idea, and maybe you'll carry out a few steps of it, have a couple of email exchanges and a meeting or two. I've got a number of those going on right now. And it just seems like it drags on. And so to find someone that has that same push, that same drive, enthusiasm, excitement for their industry, it was just huge. And, you know, Ally and I kind of seen some of each other's work. I had published one of her clients, so I was able to see, you know, in publishing that client's book, I was able to see and experience the Ally effect, if you will. And then also just kind of indirectly, because the client was still in conversation with Ally as we worked through the publishing process. Well, Ally got, you know, hints of what, you know, Bridgett's about or what Press 49's about. So indirectly from a distance, you know, we had some sense of what each other was like, but it wasn't until we worked on this. And I'm telling you, Ally said something about if there was ever going to be a delay in one of us getting something done, we would communicate it. I don't know how many time points or time pieces we had to meet or deadlines we had to meet. I really don't remember any delays in anything. If we said we were going to get something done by a certain date, we did. I mean, I think, Ally, didn't you and Douglas have COVID at one point and you were still pushing through? She got married in the
I
middle
could
of
see her
this?
doing that. I could see her doing that.
Yeah. Yes.
Bronchitis, COVID, I don't know, all kinds of things went through my house in the last 18 months. And I was just over
Amen.
there like wiping my nose in the back of my hand and still
Gotta get it done. Gotta get it done.
Like, you know, there's somebody else waiting on this. But yeah, I mean, there was definitely a mutual commitment. And as Bridgett said, you know, we at least knew enough of the quality of the output that we were doing as separate service providers with clients to be able to recognize that we were at least in this, right, with somebody else who cared as much as we did. And, you know, and then it was just like all gravy from there, like, you know, getting to learn about each other on the more personal level, you know, to the point of having inside jokes, or her being able to recognize that I have like a really ridiculous timing for when to drop F-bombs and really specific times for comedic effect. You know, so.
Or Ally, you even being able to read between the lines from an email message from me and say, okay, something's wrong with Bridgett, like she's sick, or maybe she's had a death in the family or something. And actually both had happened, right? And I didn't explicitly say I'm sick as a dog and barely clinging on to life and XYZ died. Like she already knew just from the tone and tenor of
I mean, she's a word person. She's a writer, so she understands, like, if she read my writing, she'd know it was mine. If she read your writing, she knows it's yours. So she knows when it's off. It's very prophetic, I guess. I don't know.
A yes followed by just a bunch of white space and then a signature. And I'm like, nah.
Yeah.
I don't know what's happening, but this is not Bridgett. Like
those are her amazing listening skills, you know, reading between those lines. So for both of you being in this field, this industry, what it's about, the story, the background, people getting out there, what they are, who they are. And Bridgett, this goes back to something you had posted a couple of weeks ago that I commented on, and it steps away from your book for a moment, but I'm curious because I have you both here and this is your field. This is your bread and butter. This is what you're passionate about. The role of AI going forward. Can you speak to that? Honestly, F-bombs dropped, whatever you want.
I love that you're asking. I love that you're asking this because this was one of those chapters that did not make the initial cut.
I was going to ask too if it was in there.
In Ally's outline. And it was a Supreme Court ruling that got handed down in the middle of us working on the project that I came across. And I immediately text or email Ally and said, listen, we've got to discuss AI in the book. I mean, I know it's, you know, however many words at this point, but, you know, and if this book had been written back in, let's say, 2015, 2019, this wouldn't even be a topic of discussion, right? I said, but we owe it to our readers that we discuss AI. And so we both tackled the chapter. I tackled it from the standpoint of kind of more of a legal standpoint, I think, for me, and who owns that intellectual property and the risk that you run if you're using AI to create your book. I drew on my 1.5 years of law school for this portion. Right. But I talked about that case. I believe it was Thaler versus, or maybe it was the United States versus Thaler. At any rate, this guy had created something using artificial intelligence, and who owned the intellectual property was being called into question. And the ruling was whoever or whatever created it is who owned the IP. Well, the program that he used owns the IP. However, we can't submit or create a copyright certificate or an IP certificate and issue it to a thing or platform or program. And so I said, you want to start thinking about that could be applied in the instance of a book. You want to be able to lay claim on your book and say, this is indeed my IP. And you might run a risk of not being able to do that if you're using some kind of a platform, some artificial intelligence to create your entire book. Now, there are smart ways to use AI, and we talk about that in the book. However, you need to make sure you're using it in a smart way.
Okay, so the chapter did make it into the book. Okay,
oh, yes, okay. It did.
Okay.
It did. I believe it's chapter 7.
Okay. Ally, what are your thoughts on the whole, even aside from the legal aspect of it, where do you see the future now with AI and publishing and whatever the books may be, fiction, nonfiction, memoir? Where do you see it going? What do you think it's going to look like now that some people, Bridgett, I think you had said in that LinkedIn post that it was somebody who had gotten an award, right? She won an award, but then it was found out that she used AI. And I think I'd comment about, there's going to be asterisks from now on saying, just so you know, whatever you're thinking or reading or applying to this book, whether it's an award, credit, whatever it may be, know that whatever percentage is AI. What do you think at this point, from what we know, what do you think the future of publishing is going to be, Ally? I'm not going to hold it to you in 25 years and come back and say you got it wrong or you got it right, but what do you think that's really going to look like?
Oh gosh, well, I can tell you what I hope it doesn't look like. I hope it doesn't look like a bunch of vanilla, basic, unauthentic, like lacking information, heart and head kind of product out there. Millions of books are published a year, because of how many different avenues to publishing there now are, right? Not everyone is going through traditional anymore. In fact, I almost wonder how much longer traditional will last. I don't know if that's 5 years from now, 10 years from now, but the alternative routes to publication right now, there are so many, and they're becoming so much more popular, that I do wonder, and this has really kind of nothing to do with AI necessarily. This is just like the advantages versus disadvantages of publishing routes. I wonder how much longer traditional will last, or if traditional needs an overhaul in its business model and its practices, and what's going to happen there. I think AI is only going to complicate and confuse things for all publishing paths going forward, because there's always going to be the question of, how much of AI being used inauthenticates the author and the credibility of the author. How much are we willing to allow? In what ways are we willing to have AI step in and support the writing and publishing? And I feel like things have already changed and shifted since we drafted that chapter and put it in here. So from that particular chapter's perspective, I came into it from to write a book using AI is not actually writing. Writing is an active verb, which means it requires your participation. To put in a prompt to a machine who then spits out a result is prompting a book, not writing a book. Because to me, writing is a series of drafting, revising, and editing, and then repeating that whole process until you come to a final thing. Typing in a prompt and hitting enter, and then letting something spit out whatever it's going to spit out, and then you taking the time to do a little cleanup, to me isn't truly writing, isn't truly using your own brain, your own thoughts, your own intentions and values to shape a narrative, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, and any subgenre that falls underneath it. So like anything else, AI is a tool. There's ways to use it, I think, that are appropriate, and there are ways to use it that I think are less ethical and have less integrity involved. Ultimately, it's a neutral thing. It's a resource. How we use it is really up to us as the human prompter, the person who is integrating it into our final work. I think there are lots of programs that can be useful in generating outlines, brainstorming, maybe taking a look at something you've written and helping you figure out how to finesse it. So I wouldn't say that there's no space or no room for AI programs at all. But my biggest thing is, how much a part did they play in the final product? Can you truthfully and wholly say, this is mine, if a majority of the heavy lift was something else that was pulling from a variety of other places to get to the end result? And to me, this is particularly problematic for those people who want to write a nonfiction book that's about their thought leadership. Because right now, as far as I know, we don't have an idea of just how many sources these AI tools are pulling information from. So now for me, this is riding a fine line with plagiarism, piracy, copyright infringement. And you're going to then say that you're the thought leader in this space. Then be the thought leader in this space and write your own shit down on a piece of paper and claim it as yours, and leave AI as far out of it as you can.
You don't know whose toes you may be stepping on. Like Ally said, you don't know where this content is coming from when you plug in a prompt and then it spits something out at you. I like to think of this in terms of, a home cooked meal versus popping a TV dinner in the microwave. Which one do you want more of? You want the real thing. Which one do you want? A boxed brownie mix or brownies made from scratch? Which one is your reader going to want? And in the process of writing the book, John, Amazon, Kindle Direct Publishing changed some things with regard to AI. Now, when you submit your manuscript to KDP, Kindle Direct Publishing, there is a new question in there asking, was any portion of this created using AI? Now, it's just a yes/no question, just a binary question. I don't know what they're doing with the data that's being collected and if they're going to expand on the question or anything like that. But things are changing because of AI in the publishing industry for sure.
Yeah, sorry, I was having a problem with the microphone before, but I did get what you said, Ally. And that's the way I kind of see it is, hopefully it's a game of capitalism, right? But capitalism there's social capitalism. There's spending money with the companies and the missions that you want to support. And I'm hoping the masses will put their money more with the true authors than people that are just generating it. I hope it's very clear when you do purchase a book or when it is published and marketed, what portion of the book was made using AI. I think it's going to be one of those things where it's like the public decides like how much they want from the actual author versus something that's generated, something much as you outlined, something that isn't real. Just because you lose so much, I don't have to tell you ladies, you know how much you lose because you know how much people put into the books that they trust you with. So it's going to be interesting to see that, but hopefully it's the public that just says, listen, I don't want that. I know it's not real, and you're going to put your dollars where you support what you want to see more of. Hopefully it is real authors, but hopefully it is the public that kind of guides that, and that's what wins out, but we'll see.
I mean, true readers are going to spot it. And I know that I'm like a super reader because of what I do, but like I had a client, I was reviewing the manuscript and I was going right along, and then all of a sudden I hit this 2-paragraph stretch, and I was like, what on earth? I was like, and I flagged it, and I said, did you use AI for this section of your chapter? And they came back to me kind of laughing, and they said, yep, you caught me. They said, I was losing steam on this chapter. I was getting frustrated that I couldn't find the words that I wanted to say. And so I tried generating, this other things result to put in here to kind of get me over the hump, right? Ultimately, they reworked and rewrote that section and it became theirs. But it was so glaringly obvious to me to have gone through that many pages of a manuscript, recognizing that person's voice, that person's tone, how they say things and do things, and then boom, robot.
Why was it? Was it because the sentences sounded like matter of fact versus just somebody's
they
natural?
were more formal than the way that she would have written. There was no little like quirks in maybe like sentence structure, the way that they would have normally said something. There was no personalization. It was just very clear that this was something that was generating very precise, very crisp, but also very formal and kind of automated. It wasn't that the sentences were wrong per se from a grammatical standpoint or from a structure standpoint, but when you're reading somebody and you feel like that person is talking right to you, and then all of a sudden you get the voice automated message asking you to leave, leave your note after the tone, you're like, what the heck just happened, right? And so, what we have to hope is that, if writers are using these tools in this instance, right, like they're stuck, they don't know what to say, they're frustrated, they're burnt out, whatever it is, that on the revising side of things, they're catching where they used these tools and then revising so that it's back to them, it's back to their thoughts, and then we're back kind of doing things the way that I believe that they should be done. And in this instance, that did work out in the long run. But for those people who are just trying to get this done quickly, and honestly, John, this is why I think people are attracted to be using AI to write their book, is because it's fast, it's speedy, it takes less time and energy. And so it's all of this mentality and mindset around short and fast and quick and
instant gratification.
And part of that, I think, also has to do with this idea that the faster I crank out books, the more money I will make off of them. And that could not be further from the truth when you understand book sales, royalties, and the actual ROI on your investment.
Yeah.
So this idea, like, I'm just going to crank out a bunch of books and throw them up on Amazon, I'm going to make all this money. Like, you're putting out a crap product. You're putting out twice as many books that you now need to actually sell in order to make your money back. You're not clear on how to make that money back. You're under the guise of I'll build it and they will come. Like, I'll just throw it onto Amazon and now the sales will flow to me and I can retire off of my books. It's all wrong, flat out.
What I was going to ask, just in kind of that area that you're talking about, where it's almost like a writer, if they do use something like that, it's like, okay, you were burnt out. Okay, there's a few paragraphs that you used it in this whole editing process. Let's make sure you go back and kind of retool it to really be yours. When it comes to your own books, and again, this is kind of steps away from this conversation. I'm just curious, when it comes to your own books, when you're reading through them or you go back to them or you look through different areas, do you remember clearly what you were thinking when you wrote them? Do you remember the pieces that stood out as like the hardest to write? What is that experience as a writer? When you go back through your book, do things stand out like, this was a pain in the ass to write? This is the part where I got stuck on. Like, does that stand out as vivid as being there that day that you were writing it?
Wow. This is going to sound horrible. I don't remember feeling stuck. Or
whatever the case may be, like the different emotions, the different pieces.
Yeah.
As you're reading it, does it come back to you, your mindset in reading certain parts of your books, ones that stood out more than others? And if nothing comes to mind, that's fine. That's just my own curiosity about the writing process.
I will say this. Maybe there are parts, because I have a couple of books, John, that are now in their second edition. And I will say, in looking at the first edition and making the decision to do a second iteration of the book, there are parts where I'm like, that sucked. And so maybe it doesn't make it to the second. It's like, what was that crap? And you sold this to people? You promoted this mess? Right. So I will say maybe there were parts where at the time, maybe I thought they were great. But as time passed, as I engaged with more people, had more conversations, read more, just lived life.
Yeah.
Right. And years passed and your thinking evolves and sometimes your perspective changes and so on. As I was looking at some old editions, I will say at the time, I thought it was fabulous and the cat's meow, bee's knees, whatever. But then 2, 3, 4 years later, I'm looking at it saying that what the F, and so it gets deleted.
What about you, Ally, when you look back at your work?
Well, for sure that, right? We are always evolving and changing. And so the ways that we see things or the ways we would describe things today are very different than how we would have described them a handful of years ago. So I've done a book club with my first book, Dear Universe, I Get It Now, a couple of times now in the last 12 months. And so I've reread my own memoir twice now in the last calendar year. And I'm still going, oh, you know what? I would have added a paragraph here and said something else, or I would have changed the way that I had described this situation. And there's still times where, especially with memoir, depending on the emotional connection to the material, I can remember how I struggled with it, while I was drafting it. So in Dear Universe, there's one chapter that's on the first time that I witnessed racism happening on the school playground. I struggled so hard to write that chapter because I knew how I wanted it to come across as a white woman and ally. And I was terrified every time I looked at it that I was not conveying what I wanted and that it was going to leave the complete opposite impression than what I was going for. And that chapter kept me up at night when I was drafting it. And when I reread that chapter, I still look at it and go, did I do it justice? Like it still terrifies me because of the charged nature of that topic, which I know we need to talk about as a society and especially as white people. But it's like, there are so many different viewpoints on how to talk about that topic, right? That as a writer, I'm like, oh, I can't believe I put myself out there in that way. It's terrifying. And with Do Not Write a Book, very different. It's not memoir, it's nonfiction. This is like industry stuff, it's informative, it's value driven. But even when we were writing the AI chapter, I found that same like this is a really hot topic right now. And I'm supposed to be an expert. And I honestly have no idea like how this is going to shift and change in another 3 months. Like, will what I say now be thrown in my face later? Something will have shifted and changed. And I just had to remind myself, you believe in what you're saying right now. And this is a living, breathing document for today. And you know that anything can change because you will change and the industry will change and the topic will shift, a year from now. You've just got to stand by what you believe in right now. And you've got to stand by knowing who you are and what you intend and let the chips fall where they may.
As a matter
of fact, oh, go ahead.
As a matter of fact, we even put that in the book to a certain extent, John, where we say at the time of this writing, as a matter of fact, we weren't even planning on having this chapter in here, but we had to add it. We also wrote something to the effect of, we don't know how all of this is going to shake out. We just put it in there and said, if we were going to have a comprehensive guide to writing, publishing, marketing your book, and we're publishing this book in 2024, we've got to have this chapter in here. And we encourage the reader to just kind of keep their eye on this matter because it's not going away.
Yeah. No, I appreciate those insights. I'm always curious with any kind of creative artist, whether it's a musician, a writer, filmmaker, when they look back at their work, how do they view it? And just that evolution of changing in life, it explains so much. So I appreciate that. Ladies, which book for each of you has impacted you the most? And I know since you're in this space, you probably have several. Maybe there isn't one that jumps out, but Ally's looking around for her books.
This is a hard one. I'm like, oh gosh, is it, what is it? Bridgett, do you have one that rises to the top? I mean, you've published like dozens at this point.
Right. Well, I will pick one from the Press 49 bookshelf. Wow, actually, there are a couple, and they're both memoirs. So, two from Press 49 that I can give you right off are Get Your Greater, which won an award by Mark Shepard, as well as Life After Kevin, which also won an award by Susan Lynch. They're both memoirs. What made them so impactful for me is they have you stepping back and realizing your problems are not that big. Your challenges in life, yeah, they have influenced you and have shaped you. But wow, look at what these people are overcoming, have overcome, and look at the strength they have in them despite all that happened to them. So I will give you those two Press 49 titles, and then I'll come back with maybe another title or two from those other publishers.
Ally?
Oh gosh. Well, so Susan and her book Life After Kevin are near and dear to both Bridgett and I, since we both worked with Susan. But I would say more recently, this one is forthcoming this coming June. And this is a client's book of mine called Though I Walk. And this is a memoir by a man who in his 50s uncovered repressed memories of child sexual abuse by the priest that ran the Catholic school that he went to as a child, and having uncovered those memories through alternative therapies. As a person who was raised Catholic, as a mother of a boy and raising him in the Catholic Church, as somebody with a mental health background, this book hit me in a lot of different ways. It was beautiful and gut-wrenching all at the same time. The story is powerful. The work with the client was transformative for both him and myself. It was deep, deep work and has been 18 months in the making.
Wow.
So I'm really looking forward to seeing that book out there this spring. He has been on a mission from the very beginning to try to break open this conversation, to try to use the book as a call to action for people to wake up, recognize that this is still going on, that this is still happening in our communities here in our country and globally. And he deserves to have the peace that writing this book and story has brought him.
Bridgett, did the other book come to you?
Yeah,
It's
but
okay if it didn't. I'm just always curious.
Yes. But the thing is, I don't know that there are a couple of titles, actually. I tend to read multiple books at once. It takes me years to finally finish all of them. I don't know how many I'm reading right now. Like, seriously, I've lost count. These two that have impacted me a lot are quite on a personal level. So I don't know that they'll have this mass appeal, but one is entitled Journey of the Adopted Self. And then the other one is The Primal Wound. I'm a late discovery adoptee. It's a whole different population, meaning you found out years into your life that you were adopted, mostly in adulthood. And it is you live a totally different life, and you live life through a totally different lens. And so those books are, quite personal to me, or quite specific to my personal circumstances, but I will say they have impacted me quite a bit, because you're reading and you hear an author who gets it. Most people just don't get it unless you live in those shoes. So yeah, those are the other two, but nothing earth shattering.
No, thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
Final question, just to each of you, if you want to share what you're up to these days. I mean, obviously you can share anything about the book, anything you have coming up, but anything for your work, your individual companies, anything you want to share with this audience, please. The floor is yours.
Well, I think it would be remiss for us to not mention that Bridgett and I are co-facilitating a 2-part workshop in April called Do Not Write a Book Until You Attend This Workshop. And We're gonna die on this hill, John. We're gonna
Absolutely.
use
I mean, that's what you're supposed to do before the book comes out, when the book comes out, after the book comes out. I mean, that's how you get your ROI. I mean,
that's how we get our ROI. So what we're hoping to do in that 2-part workshop is guide people through the book, parts 1 and 2 for the first session, 3 and 4 for the second session. They get a copy of the book as a part of participating. But more than that, which is the most important piece, is that they're going to walk away with a roadmap to writing and publishing their book. So we're giving them that strong foundation so that they can have that strong finish, and they get the expertise of the two of us for 2 90-minute sessions in April.
anything you want to share about or go ahead, Bridgett.
Yeah, well, no, Ally, was there anything you wanted to share about the right time, right place? Any exciting things happening?
Well, so I already mentioned Though I Walk is coming out in June. We've got the workshop in April. And I guess the one other thing that I would say is I've got a new hybrid program. It's part kind of one-to-one work, part group, has a curriculum. It's called the Memoir Blueprint. And it's a 3-month program to get people who want to write a memoir to build out that outline that is so critical to getting that book really done in the long run. So if folks are interested in that, I would love for them to reach out so I can tell them more about that program.
At Press 49, we have multiple new titles coming out. So excited about what's coming out in 2024. So just make sure you're following us on social media to see what we are releasing. But we do have a number of titles. One that I'm really excited about is called I Think I Love My Job. Yeah, by Dr. Khalifa Oliver. That's coming out in June of 2024. Another one coming out by Nona Lee called The Truth About Us. That's going to be very exciting. And then another one coming out in the summer called Kamala in the Motherland, and a few others. Super Architect by Bo Dromiak. A number of titles coming out this year. So just follow us to see what we have coming out in the nonfiction world. And we are launching, Press 49 is launching its children's book division this year. So again, just stay in touch with us. Yes. And I'm very excited about the first title. I'm not telling y'all about it right now. You gotta just, connect with us. I can spill all the beans. Yeah, so a lot of exciting things happening at Press 49.
That's amazing for both of you and your companies. Thank you so much for being here and taking the time to go over your book. And again, Bridgett and Ally's book is Do Not Write a Book Until You Read This One, the only guide you need to pen, publish, and profit from your nonfiction book. Ladies, this was fun. Thank you so much.
Thanks, John.
And if there's anything that I might have missed, anything that I didn't cover, anything that I should have asked, please let me know. I'll reach out to Bridgett. I'll reach out to Ally, see what kind of additional wisdom, knowledge, and insight I can get. In the meantime, thank you for watching and listening, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care. Bye.